Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the mind of Srinivasa Ramanujan. Now, this was a man who saw numbers in a way the world had never seen before, and honestly might never see again.
Okay, so I want you to put yourself in someone's shoes for a second. Imagine you are G.H. Hardy. You're one of the most respected mathematicians on the planet, working at Cambridge. And one day, this letter shows up. It's from a totally unknown poor clerk in India, and it is just packed with theorems that are so bizarre, so profound, they feel like they came from another dimension. This quote, that's Hardy's reaction. And it's not just him being polite. This is a man whose brain has been completely short-circuited by what he's seeing.
And yeah, this is the kind of stuff that was in that letter. I know, it might just look like a crazy jumble of symbols to you and me, but what you're seeing is something called an infinite series. It's a recipe of numbers that just keeps going forever, getting you closer and closer to one specific value. And in this case, it was a brand new, totally elegant, and just mind-blowingly original formula for pi. The whole letter was full of things like this, and here's the kicker. He offered almost no proof. It was like he was just saying, here are the answers, they're obviously true. So, right away you have to ask, who on earth could come up with this stuff? Who was this guy? Well, to understand the mind that wrote that letter, we have to leave the fancy halls of Cambridge and go all the way to his very humble beginnings in Kumbakonam, India.
See, Ramanujan's story doesn't start in some big-name university with endless libraries and resources. No, not at all. It starts in poverty, in South India, with a mind that, honestly, it felt like it had an almost supernatural connection to the universe of numbers.
His early life was just full of these crazy contradictions. I mean, by the time he was 13, he was already mastering college-level trigonometry. But his focus on math was so intense, so all-consuming, that he failed his other classes, and that meant he lost his scholarship. So he was forced to work on his incredible, groundbreaking ideas pretty much all by himself, just scribbling away in notebooks while basically on the verge of starvation. But that letter, that incredible letter, it worked. Hardy saw right through the lack of formal proof and recognized the pure, raw genius. He immediately started making arrangements for Ramanujan to come to England. And this, right here, sets the stage for one of the most amazing and, productive partnerships in the entire history of science.
You have to understand, their partnership was this incredible collision of two totally different worlds. You had Ramanujan, a deeply religious Hindu who said his family goddess, Namagiri, literally gave him equations in his dreams. And then you had Hardy, a die-hard atheist who lived and breathed the cold, hard logic of formal proof. So Hardy had this massive challenge, right? How do you teach formal methods to a genius who thinks his theorems are actual divine revelations, without killing the very spark, the intuition that made him so brilliant in the first place?
But even with all those differences, the mathematicians at Cambridge were they're in awe. This quote here from Hardy's main collaborator, J.E. Littlewood, that is not faint praise, not at all. Comparing Ramanujan to a giant like Carl Jacobi, that's like hearing a new musician and immediately comparing them to Mozart. It was them saying, okay, this guy belongs in the pantheon of the all-time greats.
All right, so what kind of math was Ramanujan actually doing? What was so special about it? Well, his work wasn't just about solving old problems. No, it was more like he was pulling back a curtain to reveal this entire hidden universe of numbers, one that was just filled with these beautiful, complex patterns and connections that nobody even knew existed.
So he made these huge contributions all across what's called number theory. For example, his work on partitions, that gave us a formula to figure out all the different ways you can add up to a number. Then he discovered these completely new kinds of functions he called Mach theta functions. And these things were so mysterious, so strange, that mathematicians didn't fully understand them for decades. And those formulas for pi? They are still part of the foundation for the super-fast algorithms we use today to calculate pi out to trillions of digits. Just amazing.
But here's the question for you. Can a number, just by itself, be interesting? It kind of sounds like a weird question, right? But nothing, and I mean nothing, shows Ramanujan's unique, personal relationship with numbers better than this one famous story. It happened while he was sick in a hospital in London.
So G.H. Hardy comes to visit him. And, he's trying to make some small talk. And he mentions that the number of the taxi he took was 1729. And he says something like, "It's a rather dull number, isn't it? I hope that's not a bad omen."
And Ramanujan, lying there sick in bed, perks right up. Instantly, with zero hesitation,
He says, no, it is a very interesting number. He explains that it's the smallest number you can express as the sum of two cubes in two different ways. Just think about that. For Ramanujan, numbers weren't just abstract ideas on a page. They were like his friends. Each one had its own personality, its own story. He just knew them.
But tragically, his story doesn't have a happy ending. The cold, damp English weather and the food shortages during the war just wrecked his health. He ended up returning to India and died when he was only 32 years old. But in the 100 years since he passed, his work has only become more important, more influential.
I mean, he completely broke down barriers. He became one of the first Indians ever to be recognized by the absolute top tier of British science. And get this, in 1976, they rediscovered a lost notebook of his, just filled with theorems from the very last year of his life. That discovery sparked whole new waves of research. To this day, mathematicians are still digging through his notes, trying to prove and understand the ideas he was scribbling down a century ago.
Maybe the most powerful way to understand his genius, though, comes from Hardy himself. Hardy created this kind of ranking system for mathematicians based on pure, raw talent. On a scale of 0 to 100, he rated himself a 25. He gave one of the greatest mathematicians of the era, David Hilbert, an 80. And Ramanujan? Hardy gave him 100, a perfect score. He saw him as the absolute pinnacle of natural mathematical ability. And this really gets to the heart of it all. Ramanujan's life leaves us with this huge, profound question. He believed his genius was a gift from God. Hardy believed it was a kind of powerful, raw intuition that had never been trained. But what is it really? What is the true nature of a discovery that seems to just appear out of thin air? Ramanujan's story, you see, it doesn't just give us incredible new mathematics. It forces us to question the very nature of genius and where groundbreaking ideas truly come from.